Hey everybody, this is Ben from T3 bringing you another Store Championship Top 8 game from Shuffle and Cut Games on January 9th. On the right we have John Delisandre piloting Kate. On the left we have Jason Dower piloting Engineering the Future. And this is before the Most Wanted list was legal. So we have lots of the Most Wanted list cards. Players were coming just to get that all out of their system as a good last hurrah. And it looks like Jason here is going to be starting off with a bunch of economy, a bunch of upgrades, assets. There's a Jackson there, Adonis, and there's some ice. So he has tons of options. I'm even seeing a Breaker Bay in there. So Jason is seeing exactly what he wants to against Kate. Starting off installing what I believe there was an Adonis campaign, or no, it wasn't Adonis, it was a Jackson. So Jason's going to go and dig a little bit, try and find some stuff, probably looking for some more ice to protect, and that Architect is going to be awesome over R&D right now. Probably going to see an install there. And pitch a couple of cards, but Jason has great cards in his hand. I see an Eve and an Adonis and a Breaker Bay Grid and an Ash. Those are all the things that he wants to get going right off the bat, so really going to put a pressure on Prepaid's money and economy right from the get-go here, and I'm sure that's going to be the plan. I'm sure it's a typical Food Coats build, at least it looks like it from this point on, and Food Coats is at its strength in this tournament, so it would be silly not to, I think. And John going just for the card draw with that Diesel, ooh, with an awesome start. He drew into a couple of Sure Gambles and Dirty Laundries, and now that Prepaid's going to get online right off the bat, and John's probably going to make a Dirty Laundry run into R&D, because why not? That's just good. And I can't quite make out, but that economy is already getting big.
Whatever, there's no ice on.
Looks like there's a little bit of confusion there where John's going to run. Checking out R&D for the free access. You may as well. It's always good. And what do we see? And it is another hedge fund. So not what John wants, but that's going to work out for him in the long run. He has the economy built already. That Prepaid is going to get him already made him his money back, and moving forward, it's definitely going to get him a lot more money with those two Sure Gambles that he has in his hand, which John wisely holds on to really reap the benefits from that Prepaid voice pad. And Jason on the other side, just drawing up, looks like he's not the happiest with his ice situation, probably looking for something else there. Actually, a little bit surprised that Jason ended up putting the Architect over HQ instead of R&D. Seems like it might have been a little bit better, especially against a K deck where the Maker's Eyes could certainly be flying on first turn. And I didn't quite catch what he installed in that remote, but John again dirty laundrying into R&D. Getting money, getting cards, making a lot of use of that Prepaid voice pad, seeing an Eli, which Jason's going to really like getting out next turn, and John running, checking the remote, making sure Jason's not getting cheeky with him, and seeing the Eve, which John did not want to have anything to do with at this point. I do see the quality time in John's hand as well. I'm sure that's going to come out. Maybe John's waiting for another Prepaid before he plays that. Maybe John just wants to get some of his economy out. But either way, drawing into the Technical Rider is going to be a big help there. That's very underrated card. Well, it was underrated until World, and I think that card can get slotted into a lot of decks, a lot of modern decks, just because there's so many things that get installed and overwritten and rewritten and saved and brought back, and a lot of value there for the Technical Rider. And I believe Jason just installed the Breaker Bay Grid over that Eve, and throwing the Eli, I believe, over R&D and drawing up again. So Jason's going to at least be able to get a free Eve campaign rest here, and John is going with the quality time right now. So the Maker's Eye, Lucky Find, Dirty Laundry, more economy. Man, John's deck has given him exactly what he wants. Minus, I'm sure he would love to see another Prepaid voice pad at this point. but getting the technical rider out, he can throw down, and he's going to make use of some of his Kate bucks. Second time we're seeing that ability come into play, but getting bank off the technical rider and wanting to install the SMC without wasting Kate's discount, and also more credits on technical rider. So good stuff. I'm sure John anticipates that that's the Breaker Bay Eve combo over there in the remote, and there's really no point in running unless you can trash both of them. I feel, and Jason resing both of those on his turn, going to start to get that economy rolling. He's going to really be able to get his board state built up a little bit, and I'm sure if Jason could find some more ice, he needs to start building a scoring remote, and even building that over the Eve server right now, that would be pretty solid. He's probably going to want to take some turns anyway to just get that fortified, get his upgrades in there. We know that there's an Ash in there. I'm sure that Jason's playing a Caprice someplace down the line, and we can expect to see that later. All those things Kate hates to see, and Kate on the other side just wants to get the board state built up a little bit more, get that second prepaid online. You never want to see dirty laundries getting discarded, but anything like that, and I think John still has 2 lucky finds and 2 sure gambles and a Maker's Eye maybe in his hand. So that dirty laundry really isn't that important in the long run, especially now since Jason has covered up his centrals, and I'm sure that's a Chrysium grid installed in R&D. We saw in one of the other games before, but that's just a really, really good thing to protect against Kate's Maker's Eye. So even though Jason left R&D open at the beginning and John whiffed on a few dirty laundry runs, Jason still hasn't really seen any agendas or anything like that. So protecting that R&D is paramount at this point, and John going in and getting his Mimic after the Architect res to get through. And he'll be accessing here. I don't believe Jason has any agendas in his hand, but, seeing those upgrades now could be really valuable. Oh, and he hit the beta test there. So this is not good for Jason. Hadn't realized he had the accelerated beta test in his hand. However, John now has 2 of his breakers out, a full Lady and the Mimic, and is in a really good board state. He has, he doesn't have his console, but prepaid doesn't really need it. He has his Mimic. His Fractor, he has his Killer, he has a prepaid out, and he has a bunch of money cards in his hand. Oh, and there's the Gordian Blade that John just drew up. So he's going to be able to put a lot of pressure on all of HB's servers. And if John can get the momentum up a little bit, I know he's a little bit low on credits, however, that lucky find he has in his hand is going to be really good to regain some of that momentum. John can really start putting pressure on HB, and even though HB has the economy to kind of res everything, or probably res most things, and really put up a good front, John and his Kate is going to need to start trashing those assets. And I know Eve is never one that you want to see sit out, just because it does have such a big return on investment. It is really, really slow, and a lot of the times you'll see court players overwrite that after 4 or 5 turns, just to free up the server, because you build a scoring remote over that server. It takes a little bit of time, taxes the runner if they want to try and go check it out, and then at the end of it you just slip in global food or an accelerated beta test and really punish the runner for not being able to go through that over and over and over. And Jason icing up over the Architect on HQ, wanting to shore that up a little bit. I couldn't see what that is, but I would expect maybe an Ichi 1 over an Architect would be really, really solid. Most likely we'll see probably like an Eli or something like that, but which isn't the greatest with against Lady, but is definitely worthwhile. And we see John here, he did play the Lucky Find and is going to blow up both of the Eve and the Breaker Bay. And if you're going to do it, as I said before, you got to blow up the Breaker Bay grid. If you don't, you're just giving the Corp all of their money back, basically. Just because Breaker Bay is so big in reducing the cost of all of HB's assets and upgrades that if you can't trash the Breaker Bay, and honestly, there's been a number of times in my own games where I've gone in and I've just elected to trash the Breaker Bay grid and not trash the Eve, just due to economic or tempo, but Breaker Baker is the most important thing to trash against these decks. Now you can play Eve with no downside, which is probably the biggest effect. Oh, and there we go. Jason showing his hand a little bit. We see an Ash and an NAPD in his hand. That NAPD is probably going to be perfectly safe for the time being. I don't think John's going to be able to get in that server with the money. And John opting to check that remote with the upgrade, and this might be another Breaker Bakerid. So there's another Eli, which is just going to cost John a counter and a buck, so nothing doing there. And just choosing to access and resing the Breaker Bakerid with the Adonis. So John could go almost broke. That's going to be 7, or sorry, it's only going to be 5 to trash both of them, and yep, that's what we'll see here. But getting John back down to a very, very low credit count, and John is still drawing into everything that he wants to see. We see another Lucky Find in his hand. There's a Sure Gamble, a Legwork, a Gordian Blade, a Maker's Eye. John has a lot of stuff, and I'm sure he'd love to see another prepaid to really, really get benefits from that. But that's kind of what happens with these, or what happened, I should say, with these prepaid decks. You know, you don't always hit what you want. Some games you don't see a prepaid until halfway through your deck, which isn't good, but most of these decks just consist of money and good cards. So really never a bad thing. The prepaid just gives you a lot of extra value, especially out of Kate. And Jason securing that remote a little bit further and dumping something. I believe that was the Ash. I don't think he would play the NAPD here, at least without advancing it once, but he might just be trying to bait John into running it and trying to steal it. But if John goes up to 4 points here and Jason has 0, that's going to put him in a bit of an uphill battle. The HB decks, these food codes decks, are very, very robust. So even going up to 6, let's say if John was able to score another. Okay, so just seeing the cyber decks and purging at the end of it, but ultimately costing John a couple credits, 2 credits to get in and trash the cyber decks, and a lady counter. But as I was saying, if John can go up to 6 points before Jason has any, that's definitely going to make it an uphill battle for Jason. Even though these HB decks do have the benefits of Caprice and Ash and all of the money in the world, it tends to come down to time. And these HB decks are pretty slow. They have a low agenda density. So if John were able to go up to 6 against Jason at 0, we might see a problem because it would really, really force Jason to have to score out a bunch of 3-pointers or try and tax Kate out of the server. Because these prepaid decks are very, very robust, as I mentioned before. That's why they're so popular. And they can get into pretty much any remote very, very quickly, even though they seemingly don't have a lot of money. And Jason here deciding to go through and take a look and see what economy John has left. And I know we've seen all his dirty laundries. We've seen at least a couple lucky finds, or at least 1 lucky find and a couple of sure gambles. So John's economy is starting to run a little bit thin, and John might be searching. Okay, so we see another lucky find and John going up 7 extra bucks. Pretty good. We might be seeing John actually looking for his levy here. If nothing else, getting all of that money back in the deck, it would give Kate a pretty big advantage, even though he hasn't gone and seen everything else. He would love to see another prepaid, I'm sure, but John does have his rig out, with the exception of an Atman, but he does have all of the breakers. So, historically, Atman at 4 is really good against HB, and I don't believe this is any different, but it's still really taxing with Eli's and Ichis and the like. So we'll see. And Jason install advancing, I believe, and he has an Ash in that server, so I believe he installed advanced the NAPD. That seems to make sense. And it was an Ichi over R&D there, and John clicking through it and daring Jason to pump for the trace. But as we see all too often, never happens, and Kate just walks through without any issue here. So John's doing the naked run to bait out that Chrysium grid, or at least try and trash a Chrysium grid so he can go in and Maker's Eye later. I don't think anything that Jason has behind the Ichi is really going to stop John in this case. Yeah, and in this, John is even going to be able to trash that Chrysium grid after getting through the Eli. So, yep, seeing the Chrysium grid, I think John has to trash that. He does have the Maker's Eye, so yep, we see that go away. And if Jason can't replace that Chrysium grid pretty soon, John's going to be going in with a Maker's Eye, seeing 3 cards, and yep, you can see that's in the foreground of John's hand, really wanting to go in. He might even be debating playing that this turn, although no, he's definitely not debating doing that. He would have no way to get through the Ichi. So just contemplating a little bit here, trying to check it out. I expect John's just going to be drawing or gaining a credit at at this point. And there's a little bit of trash talk going on. That trash talk. Both of these players are really good friends. They've played a lot of times. I've played both of these players a lot. Great guys, a lot of fun to play, a lot of table talk. And I think that might be the California thing here. We get a lot of table talk in at this level of play. And John is running 4th click. Oh, and that Ichi too is going to be terrible. Probably, yeah, I would expect to actually. I'm not sure what Jason's best play here is, because he can't score the NAPD. But if Jason doesn't trash so he's trashing the lady. But if Jason doesn't trash that, then the NAPD in the remote is susceptible to being stolen. Although Jason could just res the Ash. So I'm not sure why you don't let. Well, I'm assuming that's an Ash as well. That could be a Caprice. And if that's the case, then the if that is the case, then trashing the lady is definitely the better play. But I have a feeling like we're not going to get the chance to find that out right now. So get to hold on a little bit longer, and because Jason can't even score out the NAPD if he wanted to. Although no, he probably would score that. So Jason taking the time, icing up Archives, getting a free buck because you're HB, why not? You may as well install some ice. And this just set John back quite a bit, though. I don't think there are any remote or any servers that John can actually get into without catastrophic effects. You know, he can't legwork into HQ. That Architect is locking it down pretty well there, although we haven't seen any clone chips out of Kate. So those cards can come right back. When John wants to. However, John does have to kind of draw up and get those cards. And I don't think John was expecting to hit an Ichi, although he was thinking an awful lot before he made that run. It's top 8. You got to make really aggressive plays at this stage of the game. So John, I think, was just going and hoping that he could lay down kind of a kill shot. I had mentioned it before. If John can really go up a lot of points quickly, that's when it puts more pressure on HB in that deck, because eventually the deck is going to give up the agendas. Some point, might not be now, might not be next turn, but somewhere down the line, HB will not be able to score out agendas and have them stuck in their hand. John has a lot of utility here, but not a lot of money. I'm sure we would see that quality time play if John had a little bit more money to free cards out of his hand afterwards. But he's kind of restricted. He does have the 5 technical writer credits, which is worth noting, and I believe that's a quality time or not a quality time, a lucky find in John's hand. So John can get a fair amount of credits pretty quick, and actually scavenging the Gordian Blade away here. I'm not sure what he's gonna do it for. Probably Lady would be my guess, since we have both the scoring remote and R&D covered by Eli. So The lady play seems good, and it gets the most value out of Scavenge and that Gordian Blade. Which that's not a combo you see too often, and John, the Scavenge in prepaid decks, although it's awesome, it's so good for refreshing lady counters, or even in this case it's a great source of recursion, often underplayed or not played at all in the most wanted list, or in the pre-most wanted list world. I expect we're going to be seeing it a lot more now that things like clone chip and prepaid are not, or a little bit more restrictive to play. And John does see his second prepaid voice pad. So for $1, totally worth it. I expect we're going to see a lucky find here for clicks 2 and 3. And John would basically be giving up the NAPD at this point. But not that John knows it's an NAPD, but with that one advancement counter, it's pretty clear, you know. Jason isn't threatening scoring out a global food and going up to 3 points. So allowing Jason to score the NAPD, you know, you never actually want to score it. Or I wouldn't say never. I've played in a lot of games where it is. But for the most part, it's more of a tempo hit for the runner if the runner were to steal it than it is a benefit for the corp for them to score it. And yeah, Jason's thinking about doing it here. He might be thinking to res that asset in the remote, which if he res the asset in the remote and then tried to score out. So, okay. Actually just going for the bucks here. So feeling pretty secure with that NAPD, or at least not feeling secure enough with his economy. That might be a little bit more accurate here. I don't think Jason's trying to bait, you know, an aggressive secretary. He did just have that Ichi land, so it seems like it would be a little overwhelming, or it doesn't seem like the value is there for Jason to try and land the aggressive secretary play, but trying to stabilize a little bit more and build up and fortify while there is an NAPD and an upgrade in that server. It seems like it's pretty good here. And John going in for the Maker's Eye, free Maker's Eye with his prepaid voice pads. John has a little bit more money here and has the ability to click through the Ichi. So getting through, and Jason going to thin out the agenda density in his deck a little bit. Always good to do before those Maker's Eye runs fire. And we'll probably, so another Jackson, a face down card, and we'll probably see like an Eve or a Breaker Bay or an Adonis going back would make the most sense. Actually just going for the hedge fund. So I guess Jason is not, just wants the quick dollars. I'm not sure about that one. I think the Breaker Bay or the Adonis or the Eve campaign might be a little bit better in this case, just because it taxes John's economy more and it makes him have to respect that. Plus, you know, you can always bluff out the Adonis or Breaker Bay, or excuse me, I keep saying that, Adonis or Eve as kind of like an accelerated beta test or Project Vitruvius, and force John to running into it later in the game as it gets down to the wire or game point. And now that Maker's Eye is seeing the Jackson. And yep, we're gonna see that one go away without too much thought. Although that does put John below NAPD range. And seeing the Biotic Labor. So this is a little bit of a hybrid deck. Didn't place that one correctly. Jason's running a hybrid deck here instead of a straight up food coats. But that information is really going to be really good for John to know. Now he has a little bit of a heads up. Maybe he has to account for that moving forward. Although it does turn, so John might be a little bit worried now, because seeing the Breaker Bay grid, that card in the remote could actually be the Global Food Initiative, and Jason might just be waiting to draw. And and he is advancing it again. So at the very least, Jason is threatening the Global Food Initiative play here, and since John knows that Jason plays Biotic Labors, we might be able to. He might be assuming that has been a Global Food Initiative the whole time. So Jason unknowingly, I would probably guess, throwing a really big risk here at John. Jason doesn't know that John knows of the biotic labor plays. I'm pretty sure that's the first one we've seen all game. So John has that going through his head, and I think that's why we're seeing such a long contemplation from John here, because he's afraid that card in the remote is actually global food, not the NAPD that we were thinking before. And unfortunately, I have no better insight than the board state because I cannot see what cards are in Jason's hand. So just on to speculation here, and we do see another technical writer in John's hand. He does have the technical writer in play with a bunch of money, well, at least 6 credits. But John would have to, or at least I think it's most cost efficient for John to click through the Ichi at this point. So if you're counting the taking money from technical writer and running, those are all 4 of John's clicks. And then, $1 for the Eli. But if it turns out that is an Ash in the remote, John would be stuck and unable to do more than trash the Ash. However, if it's a Caprice, then John would be stuck with a Psy game to either, get the points or not. And I don't think that's a position that John really wants to be in right now. But actually, even if John opts to not take the technical writer, okay, so he's going to. So scratch that line of thought. I think this makes the most sense. John needs money. He needs to at least threaten that remote. Especially, if he can get in and at least make Jason prove that it's an NAPD, then it would be pretty good here. He just has to really, really hope that it's not a global food, I think. So this is going to be, this is an entire turn. So taking the technical writer, running on the remote, clicking through the Ichi, and the trace fires away. That is trace 3, so it's a pretty big upgrade between the Ichi 1 and the Ichi 2. Jason making it a trace 4, so John would have to pay 3. And if that is the case, so that would bring John down to $6, then it would bring John down to $4, or $5, to get through the Eli, and at $5. Okay, so he is just taking the brain damage and the tag, just losing the quality time, which I'm sure is the least or the best for John to lose in this point. And it was the Ash. So I think Jason's going to be able to lock John out. It's going to be trace 4, and he has $9 on the board. And yeah, so he could definitely choose to lock John out if he wanted to. I think Jason is thinking about it here, trying to figure out what he wants to do. Because the problem here is if that is... Okay, so pumping it to 2, or by 2 to 6. So he's really showing that that's an NAPD here. Daring John whether or not he wants to check with $3 or not. But with the $3 would allow John to trash the Ash as well. So I'm kind of surprised here. I think... Okay, so John's not going to check the remote, just opting to trash the Ash, leave some money. So yeah, Jason's play there looked like was going to try and empty John's bank entirely, force John to pay a bunch. Then yeah, just show him the NAPD, which was pretty telegraphed there. But Jason finally getting on the board, going up to 2 points, and that remote is looking really solid even without the Ash there. And Jason just dumping another asset or upgrade into the remote. Again, I have no idea what it is, but it is pretty safe, I imagine. I mean, if Jason is trying to bluff out the agenda or get the agenda snuck through, it isn't protected. John does have the ability to check. However, it's going to cost him 3 clicks and a lady counter in order to do it. So John just opting for the Maker's Eye with free Maker's Eye, which I think is a lot better for him. Clicking through the Ichi and paying to get through the Eli. It's effectively the same thing. However, John gets to, same cost to John, although he gets to see way more cards and hopefully snag an agenda off the top here. Seeing an Eve, piece of ice, and I think it was another biotic. So John does know that John knows that Jason now has a biotic in his hand, probably counting that installed card is not a 3-pointer, since Jason could just go. Oh, I guess Jason is assuming that this prepaid K deck plays Clot, and Clot is on the board, with the SMC, Clot is a valid play for John to make. So that was another thing that Jason could have been doing here. He might have been trying to force John to go too low of credits to get out. Okay. Oh, so we're seeing it anyway. Jason's just going to go for it here. Installing, playing the Biotic Labor to go back up to 3 clicks, and we're going to see some advances. Advance, and John's going to go for it. Pop for the SMC, go for the Clot. And I'm excited to see what this is. This might have been a mistake on Jason's side. He might not have thought, or he might not have been thinking about the Clot play at this point, or he might just be into taking a risk. I'm not really sure. However, opting to go for it in a new remote server instead of the existing remote server is a pretty ballsy play, or at least it's also a telegraph here. It might give John a little bit of insight as to what is in the scoring remote, but I think Jason could also be trying to. Jason's doing a lot of thought here. I think this was just a misplay. This is after a lot of hours in Netrunner. We're at this point, I think we're probably at like 10 or 11 o'clock at night for a tournament that started around 11. And just leaving it unprotected. Yep. So Jason just misplayed that a little bit. Netrunner fatigue, and giving John a couple of free points. And John now is in a much better spot, going back up to 4 points, getting the Technical Rider, getting an SMC back online, getting his deck starting to go a little bit, although John has no money up at this point. So now Jason has a scoring window who also doesn't have any money. So this is definitely been a grind of a game. This is generally what you expect to see going up against HB, especially in this era of the game where they have all of the tools at their disposal. Both of these decks are very high-powered economy engines, and it's great to see that we get this kind of game in top 8, where both decks are kind of doing exactly what they want in one form or another, and we get to see a good solid game of Netrunner here, and we do see the Turing on 3 ice in Jason's hand and a Biotic Labor, so I expect we'll see the Turing go over the scoring remote in no time, and John checking the Eve, but Turing over that remote would really lock it down. It would force John to need all 3 breakers and spend a whole lot of money. The Eli's not a whole lot, but he's built that server well. The Turing over the Ichi, over the Eli, forces John to have to break every single one of his ice, and in doing so, John also can't allow any subroutines to fire. He can't click through the Turing, he can't click through the Ichi, can't click through the Eli, so John just doesn't have enough clicks. And if Jason can... Oh, man. Awesome play here. So Jason, after John diesels, Jason resing the Blacklist in that scoring server. Oh, man. Jason, I love your decks. These are great. I'm having such a great time watching both of your top 8 games. Jason, and if you hadn't seen another video I'd posted, Jason brought a very meta Gabe deck to this tournament, and I encourage you to go watch it. It was the Gabe vs. Sync deck or Gabe vs. Sync game I posted, and he was playing tons and tons and tons of mana cards. So it looks like his Corp deck is no different. We see a Blacklist, which is like prepaid's bane, especially when John has this few cards in his deck. John doesn't have a way anymore to recur. We lost a Mimic, we lost a Gordian Blade, we've seen another Lady, or no, he brought the Lady back, but the fact remains, and we haven't seen any clone chips or the Levy, so we know that, okay, and there's a clone chip that John just drew, pretty dead at this point, although it looks like John is expecting to be able to get it, or at least turning Kate's funny money into potentially real money with, into potentially real money with the 2 technical riders now in play, but this is gonna be tough here. I don't know if John has any additional ways to get into the remote. Jason taking his turn to purge, get rid of that clot, and John is kind of in a spot here. I'm not sure if John, and especially if that's a Turing over. Okay, all right, good play here. We see John getting the David out. So John now is threatening the ability to get into that Blacklist server. And with the David, yeah, he can do it. So if that's a Turing over top, then he can be Turing, spend a David counter, spend 2 David counters to get through the Ichi, let the Trace fire, and then John can get to the Blacklist with the Lady. So this is kind of the threat with these prepaid decks. This is why it was so prevalent, is because the prepaid decks have ways to get in. You've seen the influence here. John even has the 4 influence necessary to play David in this deck. This is kind of why you saw so many of the Shaper cards get added, and even right now on the board, if this were post Most Wanted, including the David, which is the only out-of-faction card, that would be 8 influence on the table right now. So, the David is really the common card that's going to get cut here. But if John doesn't play the David in this case, he cannot get into that remote. So you're kind of seeing a lot of cause and effect in this game, a lot of, why it's all going the way it is. So a really cool demonstration of why both of these decks, I guess, in some respects, got nerfed a little bit with the Most Wanted list. And yep, so John did go into the remote, and that was a Turing. So David's going to be empty, but it's not really going to matter. John is forcing the trash of the Blacklist here, and is the downside here is John is only at $1. So I think Jason has 10. I really can't make it out. I think that's 6. So with Jason's 6 credits, he can threaten the score. That scoring server that he created is extremely secure. There isn't really a way for John to get in. He doesn't have any breakers that are useful in play right now. I guess he could scavenge the Cerberus again, or scavenge the David and click through some stuff, but that remote is definitely a problem. So install advancing that was a Vitruvius, or I did see that. So if Jason can overscore the Vitruvius this turn, he can threaten that Blacklist next turn. So I think John needs to be thinking about that at this point. He does have the Levy in his hand. If John doesn't Levy here, which he doesn't actually have the money, he does have the prepaids. I don't think it's worth the technical riders at this point. So he credit. Okay, I see what John did there. So credit gaining the playing the new copy of Lady, overwriting his David and previously installed Lady. John's just setting up to get the Levy play back online, and I think if Jason can make a really good heads-up play, he has to evaluate this board state. And he does have the Biotic Labor. If Jason Biotics here, advances 3 times, scores a Vitruvius, uses Vitruvius to get the Blacklist, installs the Blacklist, I think John is going to be shut out. Unless John's getting that Levy up right now, which he does have the money now to go do. I don't know if John spent his last click, but popping the Technical Rider for 3 with the 2 prepaids seems to be the only reason you would do that, or I guess John's taking it back here, not popping the technical rider, but that would be a really good heads-up play if John has the 2 clicks left. But I think he's trying to see if he can get into that server, or he's just counting. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm a little bit lost here. I'm not sure if John is on click 3 or click 4, but if John's only on, okay, so he's on click 3 now. Yeah, so if John ditches technical writer and then goes broke to levy here, I think that's his best bet. Jason does have the money. Blacklist doesn't cost anything to res, remember, so Jason could potentially just shut John out completely. And actually, in the audio for the game, I do hear time being called. John trashes technical writer, and Jason. Okay, so going for the legwork here. He knows that time has been called. So I think John is just going in and trying to clear out agendas. I don't believe that Jason has any in his hand. I could be wrong here. Oh no! So John actually just ditched some cards. Oh no. Oh, no. So John is legworking, allowing the architect to fire, and installing in the remote. I couldn't make out what those cards were. And Jason, what are we doing here? He's going through and looking, not getting the blacklist, which I suppose the blacklist at this point doesn't really matter. Okay, so the legwork fires. It doesn't look like Jason had anything. I think the last card that we didn't see was an architect. And I expect here we're going to see Jason. Oh, I see. So this might have been the play to get Jason more money so he can res the E for free. Did that give Jason enough to biotic out? If that's a global food, I think that's a Vitruvius. But if that's a global food, he could have had the money to biotic out the global food here and actually get ahead. So Jason here is able to score out the NAPD, bringing him to 4 points, tying him with John. But John is the higher seed here, so unfortunately that is going to be a loss for Jason. John advances further into the tournament and knocks Jason out. But that's all we have for today. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.